What's up, Photo Booth Expo? So good to be here. I'm going to do a couple quick surveys to get us rolling. Who just got off the plane, landed very recently, and this is your first talk? Who's been here all day and you're just grinding through these sessions? Thank you for staying. Appreciate it so much. Next survey, I just want to learn a little bit about you before we get too deep into it. So who in the room is a DJ? Yes, all right. What about dedicated photo booth operator? Yeah, dominating. Now how about professional photographer? Okay, I know why you're here. You're waiting for me to make a mistake. All right, that's okay. I've embedded several key mistakes in this presentation just so I don't disappoint you and to cover myself. Just kidding. All right, so the topic today is lighting and exposure. And I'm really excited to talk about it. First, I just want to point out just what something I've been feeling. What an incredible time to be in photo booths. Isn't it? I mean, yeah, 100 years ago, it was probably really exciting too when they were first invented. And there were some, spurts of innovation in between there. But now in 2026, we've got all of this stuff. I know you're probably going to get sick of hearing about AI at this PBX this year. But the things we can do, the creativity, the possibilities are really endless. So I'm just very excited to be here. And it's not just AI. Okay, since 2019 alone, I want you to think about this. We've had viral glam booths, the Kardashian style. We've had spinning 360s, of course. Who can forget? Cinematic robot arms, bringing the camera in close, creating those really cool videos, and now AI portraits, right? That's a new type of substantial format every year and a half that is hitting our industry. And I'm not even mentioning all the little ones that maybe didn't get as much attention, like robot arms that draw your sketch. There's these high-angle photo booth pictures coming out of LA, keychains, baseball cards. There's so much going on. The upside of this is that there's opportunities everywhere. If you've ever wanted your business to specialize in something, you do not have to look very far to find an area that you could be the best in, or something unique you could offer that competitors are not offering in your market. But the downside of this is that it's kind of overwhelming. Has anyone felt overwhelmed by this at all in the last couple of years? Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone because it's hard to keep up. And so that is the inspiration for my talk today. That's why we're getting back to basics in this session, because great photography, great lighting and exposure, which goes into great photography, is timeless. And that will make you stand out in the long run. So join me as we get back to some fundamentals here in this session. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about me before we get into the technical stuff, just so you know who this guy is standing up here talking to you. So we have a bit of a connection. I started in 2009 with this really great haircut and these really great cameras. We did have color photos back then, in case you're new to the industry. There was color. I made it black and white. The deal was that I was in college going to school for business classes, and I wanted to actually run a business on the side and apply some of the things that I was learning. So I bought a couple video cameras with my student loan money, as college students do, and I started a video production business doing wedding videos. And it turned out this was a good time to start a business in video production. It wasn't long before I also added corporate video production. I was doing training videos, making marketing videos. YouTube was becoming very popular during this time, and businesses were saying, hey, should I be on YouTube? Can you make me a YouTube video? And the Canon 5D Mark II. Did anybody own this camera? Yeah, this thing changed everything for video. I love this. I mean, it was all of a sudden you could have that shallow depth of field and bokeh that you could not get with those big video cameras anymore. You could get this cinematic look doing run and gun shooting, and it was a blast. So around 2011, I had a friend who said, like, hey, you seem to have a lot of experience with cameras. Could you set up a photo booth for this after party? And I don't think I had ever used a photo booth before. But I said, sure, like, I can figure this out. So I bought one of these pop-up backdrops. It actually had a flash inside of it, and so it like lit up and made the whole thing white, which was pretty fun. And I had like a softbox, and I was the photographer. I called it Photo Booth Dudes, so I was the dude, and I would take photos in front of this backdrop. And then while we're getting nostalgic with technology, right, I had an iFi card in my camera which transmitted the pictures. It's like this SD card that would like wirelessly transmit photos. I still can't believe it existed in 2011. But I could get those on my iPad too, and I found an app that allowed me to set it up as a kiosk so guests could flip through their photos, and they could actually share them instantly to like Facebook, right? But they had to log in with their username and password. And if they forgot to log out afterward, or I forgot to log them out, the next person would still be logged in. And this key component that was missing of this like made for live events where it would auto log you out is what gave me this idea to create an app called Live Booth. So Live Booth the idea was it was a social sharing kiosk you could add to an existing photo booth, and then people could flip through their images, and all of a sudden you can offer like social media sharing. Live Booth did okay. This was 2012. But then after developing this app, I thought, why don't we just, use the camera on the iPad? You could cut out the middleman, the iFi card, the photographer, right? Like, I didn't want these events to all be dependent on me. Like, how can we make this simpler? And so Simple Booth was born. In 2013, we launched Simple Booth Event Edition, and I also at this time discovered that there was a photo booth industry, which was very fortuitous. And it turned out that people really liked it. So I promoted it, I made some YouTube videos, got the word out that like, hey, you can use an iPad for your photo booth. And it was very exciting. We grew a lot. In 2016, we really launched our like Halo complete product lineup, which was the app and the hardware together as a bundle. The whole ring light look was born, and we had like SMS texting from the cloud. And it like worked. We made the Inc. 500 in 2018. They did this cool write-up, and like I learned so much about lighting, exposure, photography, and all the things in between during this process. So we patented several things. In 2019, if you were here, we made a kind of a splash. We brought some vehicles out on the trade show floor. Good times, right? And then, where'd we go? Nothing. I don't know, I can't remember what happened. I can only remember a few key details of this time period. In 2020, something big happened, okay? I had my first child. The global pandemic as well, which affected us, and my kids are in the back, so hey kids, thanks for coming. Appreciate it, so the support. But now it's 2026, and so we're back. We have DSLR. If you followed Simple Booth, we didn't have DSLR for a long time. We're back with a new logo and branding to kind of symbolize the fact that we've changed a lot and evolved over this time. And we're offering, of course, AI. We'll be on the trade show tomorrow. So that's the end. If that was an ad in any way, if you got ad vibes, my advertising is done, and we're going to be focused on technical content. Okay, not too technical, a little technical. Starting with lighting. And I want to begin talking about lighting by saying, a definition, right? Photography is actually like no more, no less than the capture of light. So we would not have businesses without light. Like it is the starting point for everything we do. And so it is critical to have at least a basic understanding of how it works and how to make your photos look better with lighting. So here's an infographic that will show you basically how this works. So light comes in through your camera lens. There's a little hole in your lens called the aperture. The size of it is one of the exposure settings we'll talk about later. The light hits a sensor, and this sensor converts the light into an electrical signal that can be processed on a little circuit board, and all kinds of magic happens on that circuit board, right? To convert that electrical signal into a beautiful output image on your display. But it all begins with light. Now, to narrow that down a little bit for the photo booth industry, this is how I think about what we do. We create basically automated portrait photography systems, or we use them. And to some extent, we all create these systems. Every time you set up your booth, you're building a system. It's essentially like a photo studio that you've made portable, packed up, and set up for people to take their own portraits. Whether you have an attendant or not, it's essentially letting people do this by themselves. And the key point of why I call this a system and why I say it's automated is because it gives you an opportunity where you can actually control all the variables. Or most of them, right? We can't control the children. They're the confounding variable. But that's the opportunity, and that's what we're talking about, is like how we can control this, how we can build our own system. And the variables that we're going to talk about, we're going to start with the camera, very basically, like the position of the camera, your lens choice. We'll hit exposure at the end, and of course focus is important to get focus. With lighting, we'll talk about the position of your light, the shapes of your light, the size, the amount or the brightness of the light, the quality of the light, the color of the light, and the timing of the light. And of course, the backdrop. We also have control over the backdrop, so that's part of the system. Let's start with an easy one, all right? Camera lens. We're warming up. We want a medium/wide camera lens. And it just so happens that the Canon R50 R100, which is like the de facto choice for most photo booth businesses who are doing DSLR or mirrorless, comes with an 18 to 45 millimeter. And as that happens on a crop sensor, that's about perfect for what you need for most photo booth setups, considering that you aren't going to get crazy far from your backdrop because you need to be in sort of a compact area. Now for camera position, where we typically want the camera is about eye level or above. So at least in America, this means about 5.5 to 6 feet. Okay, this doesn't have to be exact. Obviously, people have different heights and such, so you're never going to get it perfect, and you don't move it up and down with each person. But about 5.5 to 6 feet is the sweet spot. Again, that's about eye level or above. Not crazy, far above unless you're doing a high angle booth, but slightly above is okay. And the reason slightly above is also good is because you can tilt that camera slightly down. Tilting the camera slightly down kind of gets rid of these like double chins that some of us aren't so fond of. So it's a more pleasing, more flattering look than pointing it up from above. Here's an example of that. About a 1 to 3 degree tilt. So not crazy, all right, just something subtle. We're moving on to light position. So once you've placed your camera, then ideally the lights go above or around your light, or your camera, sorry. So here's an example of what kind of lighting from above looks like. I'm going to talk about the sun a few times in the presentation. It's like the daddy of all light, okay? Humans are completely adapted to the sun, and we are used to the sun being below us? Above us, yes. The sun is typically above us, so we are very used to seeing light come from above. Light up here coming from above down to the stage, it looks natural. Light around the camera, what that does is it actually points the shadows in kind of all directions or eliminates the shadows so that you see less of people's very detailed features. And when our detailed features aren't perfect, because all of our faces have imperfections, that creates more of a flawless look. It's very soft light, it very much evens out our face and is a flattering look. So around the camera, above the camera, both good things. Below the camera, you start to get into like horror movie effect mode here, okay? It's not the end of the world, all right? Like, but it's not as natural as light from above or around the camera. And I say it should ideally be above the camera because I'm not a snob. In fact, to prove it to you, I recently set up a photo booth at a wedding, and I put the light was below the camera because I just had a ring light and I mounted the camera above the ring light. And you can tell that because the shadows point up. If the light was actually above the camera, the shadows would be more hidden. You wouldn't see them like kind of poking out from our heads. But honestly, everyone had a great time, and the photos looked pretty good. It wasn't ideal, but I was still happy with the outcome. So these are more like suggestions than rules. Okay, so now that we've talked about the light position, I want to step back and look at a couple of basic studio lighting setups. So this is your like traditional 2-light setup, okay? You didn't go to art school, you're good. I got you covered right here. 2-light setups. They're about equidistant from the camera, and this one is important. This is the key light. So the key light, wherever you are, no matter what room you're in, is like the brightest light in the room. The key light for me is these up here pointed at me on the stage, right? That's the key light in this room. Whatever your brightest light is, if you're outside and the sun's up, that is your key light. But in the 2-light setup, you bring the key light, you set up the key light, you set it to like 100%, let's say. The fill light is your other light, and you can choose what to set that at. It's called the fill light because it fills in the shadows. So the key light, if you have one main light, you have shadows. You can't have light without shadows. And they're like two sides of the same coin. The fill light fills in the shadows. So maybe you have a very dark shadow from the key light. Well, you're filling that in, okay? So you don't have like dark shadows on people's faces. 50%, let's say, is where you might set that up and then before you tweak it. Here's that same setup from behind. A 3-light setup, basically you'd put a light behind or to the side of people. It's called your edge light, okay? This is fairly uncommon in our industry, but it has a pretty cool effect. So here's your baseline light from above, and here you've got the edge light. You see it creates contrast on the edge of his face because it illuminates that and makes it brighter. And so it actually creates an edge. That's why it's called an edge light. And it's a cool, fashionable look. All right, give yourself, a pat on the back because you basically understand fundamental lighting now. And now we're going to apply it to photo booths. Does anybody have a photo booth like this? Yes, they're popular. Maybe that's why you came to this talk, though, because unfortunately, built-in RGB lights, they mix colors to make white. So, red, green, and blue are the 3 actual colors in there, and you mix them all. It's kind of the opposite of mixing paint, right, with light. It like makes it all white. And so it mixes them, and unfortunately, it's usually not bright enough. At least with these kind of the way they're built right now in our industry, most of them. So what do? We bring our own light. We bring a key light, okay? So you are controlling the light. You're bringing a light that is brighter than the RGB can get on your RGB ring light. It doesn't have to be off to the side, okay? Because there's trade-offs. If you put it off to the side, that's like makes it more complicated to manage, the flow of guests and taping down wires and things to set up. So you can certainly have that built into your photo booth on the same column. That's very sleek and convenient. You can also go 2 lights. So then we have our key and our fill. And this is great because if you have a group of people, then no matter which end of the group you're on, you have a light close to you. Okay, and the people in the middle, they have a light, they're like, being hit by both lights. So 2 lights is really helpful for groups because you're gonna be able to like cover more of the group. And then there's the possibility of RGBWW lights. I know that is a mouthful, but they're all just colors, okay? Red, green, blue, and then we have white, white. You can also have just RGBW, just RGBW, which would be one white. So basically this is saying like which LEDs do you actually have in your light. So in addition to the RGB, the red, green, blue, you have some proper dedicated white LEDs in there. And this combination is high quality, bright, and you still can do the animation. You can attract people, to your setup and make it look really cool. We'll talk a little bit about why this is valuable later on when we get into light quality. But now we're going to hit light size. Basically, bigger is better because it gives you soft shadows. Remember how I said light and dark, light and shadows are like two sides of the same coin? So here's an example of soft and hard shadows. So if you have a soft light, you're creating soft shadows. If you have a hard light, you're creating hard shadows. So don't let that terminology confuse you because people use them interchangeably all the time. But basically, we have a hard shadow and a soft shadow, and that's essentially the difference. And if you imagine that on somebody's face, like does their nose make a dark, sharp, dark line, or is it kind of filled in? This will help you understand like the nature of your lighting. And we're back to the daddy of all lights, the sun. Well, okay, bigger is better, Mark, right? So the sun is really big. So the sun is great lighting. It tracks. But actually, the sun is so far away that it's actually more of a point light in the sky. So it creates very hard light. Part of getting good at this stuff is like observing the light in any room or environment when you walk into it. So next time you go outside, just look at your shadow and just look at the line that it makes. Like, is it hard? Is it soft? Like, what is it? And so the sun is very hard light. It creates a very fine line of your shadow. It's not good for lighting. Photographers do not like shooting in broad daylight. On the other hand, when you have clouds, photographers love cloudy days. It is so easy to get good photos, good portrait photos on a cloudy day. Because what happens, we're going to get a little scientific here, okay, but not too much, is the light shines through the clouds, and that hard light then kind of bounces in different directions, like it reflects off in different angles, and then the cloud essentially becomes your light source. And that is a very big light source. Like yesterday, it was very cloudy in Las Vegas here, and it was very diffused, soft light. It's great for photos. You can do this in the studio. So this is called a scrim, and this is called shoot through diffusion. So you set up your light, and you set up some like semi-transparent fabric in between, and you point your light through it, and then your point light, the light source is no longer like this. Now the light source is as big as that fabric that you pointed it through. Now you have a big light. Turn that little light into a big light. Actually, I was at the awards last night, the Booth Mastermind Awards, and they were doing this. And because I pay attention to lighting, I noticed this and I took a photo. They're pointing the light through the umbrella. The umbrella becomes a light source. And I bet the photos turned out pretty good. So we can do this, of course, on our photo booths. In this case, it's a little more convenient, or it looks a little better from the front. It's kind of cool to show off the flash. So you can do the same thing, but instead of shooting through, you can actually reflect the light. And that's called bounce lighting. So now we're pointing the flash into the umbrella, and it's got like a reflective surface, or it's white, which reflects more light, and then that hits our subjects in the backdrop. All right, we did it. We did size, we did position, brightness. Basically, another simple rule is that brighter is better. And the reason why brighter is better, well, first of all, light comes through the lens onto the sensor. Like, it's intuitive that more light would help the sensor do a better job and get better colors. But also, on a practical level, it helps with exposure. Because when we get to the exposure variables here at the end, there's a lot going on, but it's even harder if you don't have enough light, because then all of a sudden you're constrained in what you can actually set your exposure to. You don't have as much flexibility with your settings. So more light really, really helps with that. But I'm going to give you a little hack. If you can't get brighter, like you're at an event and the bride is like, I just the pictures, like they're not turning out, it's too dark, or whatever. You can't get the exposure right. You can get closer, hopefully. So here's an example where the photo booth is like 6 feet away from the subject. If we move that in halfway, so we'll say 2x closer, it doesn't just give us 2x more light on the subject. It gives us 4 times more light. So you get more bang for your buck. This is called the inverse square law. You don't have to know the name of that law. I just wanted to sound really smart by saying it. So if you can't get enough light, you can try to get closer. We're moving on to light quality. And I just got to say it, not all lights are created equal. Our daddy light, the sun, sets the standard for all other lights. CRI stands for Color Rendering Index, and 100 is the max you can go. You can't have 101, and it's based on the sun. The sun is a perfect score of 100 CRI. When you get white LEDs, typically these, at least if you're buying them for photography, they're like 80, 90 plus CRI. That's really good quality. And RGB LEDs score a little bit lower, more in the D minus F zone. They don't have much color rendering index. And another way to visualize this is with those RGBs. If you have you're looking at the color spectrum and you plot this out, okay? The wavelengths, basically it doesn't cover the whole visible spectrum. There are gaps. It's very spiky. And if you take 2 dedicated white LEDs and you combine them, you get this nice curve. So you get broader coverage. That's kind of what higher CRI looks like. It covers more of the spectrum. And it helps the sensor be able to get the colors accurate, get natural skin tones, for example, which are extremely delicate. And so it's important if you want to do a good job. So my advice is to aim for 80 plus CRI. It doesn't have to be amazing, right? But don't settle for 50. All right, now light color is the next variable we're going to look at. And my advice for you is to match the ambient color temperature. So if you're thinking about lighting and you're walking into a room and you see this big window, right? And that window is going to be there for the duration of your event, or maybe until sunset, and you have to change it, for example, which gets complicated. That light from the sun is a particular color. We call it daylight color. In Kelvin, which is how you measure light color, that's 6,000, 6,500 Kelvin approximately. Let's say it is in this case. We want to match that. So if our light has variable color temperature, we want it to be the same value, 6,000 Kelvin. And if we have a second light, we also want that one to be the same color temperature as the first light. Notice on the screen how they look white. All of a sudden, when you have different color temperature lights, so 6,000 from the window, 4,000 from the photo booth, and 4,000 from the side light, they don't match up anymore. It's like, I don't know if you've been to somebody's house and they just don't care what lights they buy from Home Depot or Lowe's, and it's one of them is this bright fluorescent one from 1998, and then another one is a new soft white. They call soft, I think it's funny, they call it soft white for the warm, and then cool white for the cool. But basically they're different Kelvin values, and they just, they didn't spend 15 years in photography, so they don't care. But it drives me crazy. But here's the problem, okay? When you have consistent color temperatures from your lights, your camera can white balance. So what the little circuit board does is it reads the electrical signals, and there's some programming that tries to figure out what in the photo is actually white or gray, a neutral color, and then everything is based off of that. And frankly, in the right picture, the inconsistent one, probably the only white spot is where the colors mix on the tip of his nose. Otherwise, you've got one side that's warm and one side that's cool, because the camera's it's got to pick a value, and then if everything else isn't consistent, then it's just going to be wrong. and you get what's called a color cast. So don't do that. Next in the lighting segment here is timing. So now we've got this choice, right? Because LEDs have become so good. Do I want to use a flash, or do I want to use continuous lighting? Continuous would be like an LED panel that's always on. I got a Venn diagram for you, okay? I know some of you in the room just got real excited about this. Both of these are good for photos. Flash, it's a small light source, so you need to diffuse it in some way, like what we talked about with the bounce lighting or the shoot through. It's awesome for getting maximum brightness, which is really useful in very specific circumstances. But also most of these have a fixed color temperature. So what that means is that it's got to be your key light. If it's not your key light, then you won't be able to match it up to whatever your key light is. On the continuous side, it's useful because it also works for videos, okay? We can't shoot videos with flash. It was never an option for me as a videographer. Continuous lighting also helps with autofocus. Of course, autofocus on modern DSLRs has gotten really good in recent years, and so this is not as big of a factor as it used to be, but it's still convenient to have that extra light and make sure you get a tight focus when you need it. And finally, continuous lighting actually illuminates your setup. So you go to all the work of setting up this beautiful backdrop, your nice equipment, and you want it to look good. You want it to look good all the time. So when somebody walks in from across the room, they go, oh, I'm going to that photo booth later. I'm bringing my friends with me. So it's very nice for illuminating your setup and then making sure like you look good when the videographer is going around, and he's filming and maybe he films your setup. So there's benefits to continuous lighting all the way through to marketing. So what I would recommend is mix and match. Why not? Get the best of both worlds. In particular, though, if you have an event outdoors, kind of your only way to even begin fighting the sun is probably to use a flash and to be in the shade so that you can try to make the flash your key light, or at least a flash that I think they're mostly set to like daylight color temperature anyway, so it'll probably match up. And in this section, I have a bonus tip for you, okay? Lighting knowledge can improve your AI prompts. So here's a photo that we shot in New Orleans on a balcony. And it's lit pretty well. This is lit with a ring light. But I was using this as a test subject for my for some AI prompts because it was a pretty big group and I wanted to see how it would do. So I said, hey, turn this into a band album cover. And it added a band name and put them all in cool clothes. Here's that one more time for you. Some leather jackets and drumsticks. I was like, oh, that's fun. But then I thought, all right, well, what if I get a little more descriptive, a little more verbose? I'm going to put some details in here. And I turned it into this. So, I won't read the whole thing to you, but basically like dramatic studio lighting and some atmospheric fog, telling it to fix color casts. So that one, it changed the, if you see the building in the background, those are not the same color light as our ring light because it's got this greenish hue to it. And it fixed that, right? Fixed the lighting, made it look really sharp, and even added a little background blur, a little background bokeh. I was like, all right, yeah. Lighting is not irrelevant in 2026. And that does it for lighting. I've got a shorter section here now on exposure. We're going to do a crash course. There's no way to learn everything about exposure in a session like this. You really have to learn it by doing. Start flipping it into that manual mode and practicing. Maybe not the night of your event, but like bring a camera somewhere, play around. There are 3 parts to exposure. They are aperture, that hole in the lens, shutter speed, and ISO, which is basically an artificial, it's called sensitivity, but it's like artificially enhancing the brightness in the camera. And each of these has a secondary characteristic, which is what makes exposure really interesting and really fun. It's not just about how bright your image is. So for aperture, that secondary characteristic is the depth of field. Depth of field is how much of the photo, like if you draw a line from your camera, how much of that is actually in focus. So for landscape photography, you want like a lot of it in focus. You want like a wide depth of field. And then like if you're doing lifestyle portraits, you want that beautiful background blur and bokeh. That's called a shallow depth of field. It's a very small area is actually in focus. For shutter speed, that secondary characteristic is motion blur. So you can do cool things with this, right? You have somebody walking, or you're taking a picture of a waterfall, and you want that like blur effect, make it look all smooth. For us in the studio, like doing photo booths, we typically don't want a lot of motion blur. Like it's not our friend. We're not doing some creative thing with motion blur. And then ISO, the secondary characteristic is how much image noise there is. So with noise, think of it just as like digital grain, like basically pixelated dots. Okay, so it degrades the image quality when it gets too high. But all of these either make the image either darker or brighter. So for aperture, as you go to a lower number, you're making the hole bigger, letting in more light. That's a brighter image, but you're also making more background blur, creating a shallower depth of field. With shutter speed, as you make that shutter speed longer, so you're letting light in for a longer period of time, or the sensor is reading the light for that period of time, you get more motion blur, okay? But as it's like a very shorter, snappier time period, you get sharper lines and you get rid of that blur. ISO is not the end of the world, especially these days. Cameras are very good at turning up the brightness with just ISO and not showing a lot of that noise. But as the numbers go lower, you get less noise. You get the better quality image. As you crank them up, it gets noisier. And so you can see what the noise kind of looks like in that little thumbnail. Oh boy, that's a lot to remember though. How are you gonna do it? Don't worry, I got you. Here's the process. First, you just get the exposure in range. That means you get an image that's like, it's not too bright, not too dark, it's right in the middle. And then you say like, oh, like one of these secondary characteristics is wrong. So I'm gonna like turn up the aperture or like turn down the shutter speed to change it. And then you have to compensate by then changing a different value. And the only way to get good at that, honestly, is practice. But it's an iterative process. You just have to change one thing and then change the other thing to make sure your image is still the right brightness. And I got a cheat sheet for you. Yes, I do. Shutter speed. Just keep it 1/60th of a second or faster. This was always my rule of thumb for video production, because if you're filming at like 30 frames per second, then you get like 1/60th. They're divisible. It's nice, okay? Aperture, you shouldn't buy that expensive lens. Like save yourself a couple grand, okay? You do not need f1.2. Actually, this is your enemy, because for a group shot, people are gonna be standing at different distances from the camera. And so I would recommend your aperture 4.0 or higher. You really never need to go down that low unless you're doing something special. ISO, rule of thumb, 1,000 or lower, you're set. And frankly, if you have to choose between any of these and you can't do shutter speed or aperture, ISO, just set it to whatever. Get your image the right brightness. That's your final step. Set the ISO to what you need. But you really should never need to go above 1,000 if you have enough light. So it's all tied together. I don't know about any of you, but why are there ducklings on the screen? I get sick of some of the photo booth stock photos that we kind of use that are kind of cheesy, so I was like, hey, these are cute ducklings. I'll use them in my presentation. So this is our group photo booth shot of our little duckling friends. Everyone loves animals, yes! And we're gonna put this to the test. We're gonna practice. I know we got some photographers out there, so give somebody a chance first, okay? But if it's been 5 seconds and I'm standing here awkwardly, you can shout it out. What's wrong with this image? Overexposed. Sorry, I don't know how loud that was. Overexposed. This image is overexposed. So what we should do is lower any one of those 3 parts of exposure, or increase the aperture, faster shutter speed. Reduce the exposure, okay? This one should be easy after the last one. So underexposed, too dark. So what do? We increase any one of the three factors. Okay, this is going to get a little trickier, but there's a problem with this group photo. Aperture. What's the problem with the visual image? Depth of field. Okay, yes, we got blurry subjects in the front. And the way to fix that is with aperture. So we need to raise the aperture so that at this distance from the camera and distance from each other, these people would all be in focus, right? Would somebody be happy if they turn out blurry? If they're just like a little bit in front of their friend? What's the problem here? We're jumping straight to ISO. The noise, there's too much noise in the image. So the solution is to lower the ISO. Anybody? Motion blur, shutter speed, exactly, yes. That's kind of what it looks like. So thanks to ChatGPT for helping me create these variations of the ducklings. But we would increase the shutter speed. And now we're going to call this a perfect shot because everybody's in focus. It's around, it's in the exposure range. Don't have all those problems we saw earlier. So happy ducklings. Here's my bonus tip. We're just about to wrap up, so we're done with exposure and lighting pretty much here. But I would just emphasize that especially now when AI is just hitting the scene and improving in leaps and bounds, that post-processing is key for image quality. And even before just telling AI, hey, make this photo look as amazing as you can, make everybody look good and look at the camera, your software, before that, there's fundamentals, okay? And your software does affect image quality. It affects image quality in the way it handles color spaces. Like different cameras create different images in different formats, and they have different ways of encoding their color data. And your software has to handle that properly, or you may get like weird washed out images, and it's a problem. It's also about the dimensions of the photo, but not just the final photo. It's like all the steps in between, like when different things get applied, when different effects get applied, what size is the photo at that point in time, and when does it get resized into its final form? There's other stuff in Simple Booth. We've built this background blur feature, which is like portrait mode, but in the software, since we can't use Apple's portrait mode. There's skin smoothing, your glam feature. Not just like, does it have glam or not, but like, does it look natural? Does it do a good job? Do you lose details? Does it just make them look blurry? Or is it really like, oh, this is making the final quality look better? And then, color filters, and how we can change the final color to make it not just, like if you're using an iPad, not just look like a vanilla photo that came out of the iPad. These types of things can make our photos stand out, especially when you stack them all together. So I know it's probably small on the screen, but I have these two photos, and one of these was taken with a DSLR, and one of them was not. And in your head, maybe just like guess which one was taken on an iPad for a second. It was this one. This one was taken on the iPad. And I was like, wow, that turned out, like visually that turned out pretty well. If I look closely at it, yeah, I can point out flaws. I mean, when Apple moved the camera, the 12 megapixel front camera or whatever, and they put it on landscape, and they introduced ultra wide, like, curse you, Apple. Because what they also did was they made it literally, I took a photo on the ultra wide, and then I took one that is the equivalent of what you get at the normal medium. It's 3 megapixels, okay? So this was a 3 megapixel photo, but we applied the filters, the background blur, the glam, and all of these things stack up to squeeze every bit of quality that you can out of your photos. And of course, it's just gonna get crazier because we have AI in the pipeline, of course, and you can do all kinds of things to make photos look good with AI. That's a wrap for my presentation. Thank you so much. I am going to post the slides on Facebook. This is our Facebook group, so Join us on Facebook in the Simple Booth Facebook group, and I'll put a copy of the slides in there. And it'll be great to have you, and I'm on there, so you can ask me questions there, or if we have time, I have no idea what time it is, we can do Q&A.